Good morning. It's time for us to begin. We're in the book of Daniel, chapter 7. We'll pick up there in just a moment. Before we get into the study today, let's start with a word of prayer. Our wonderful Father, our God, our King, our Counselor, thank you so much for your word and the truth that it holds, that we can turn to it and find confidence in serving you and in trusting you, and that we can look to you and your word as a source of wisdom and as a way for us to step away from the world and be reminded of the purpose with which we live. God, help us to dive into your word this morning, to keep our heart focused on you and seeing the hope that is written in every page. Thank you for this time we have together with one another, eager to build one another up and to enjoy the message that we will study this morning. As you pray in your Son, our Savior's name, amen. All right, so Daniel chapter 7, we opened up last week. You'll recall we talked about the beasts. I'm going to urge the same request this time, that we still are not going to get into where the text makes the transition from the image to the meaning. So let's not jump to, as much as possible, let's not jump to what these beasts represent in terms of kings and kingdoms. We will have that time, I promise. We will get to play with that imagery in time. But what we did talk about last time is the idea of this first beast being a sign of royalty, just the lion and its royal presence, but also power and swiftness. But there is the idea that its swiftness is broken by some other power. Its wing is broken. Then you have the second image where you have the bear with the ribs sticking out of its mouth. Again, just power, its ability to consume, it's just devouring things. But it's a bit off balance, or it's striking at something. So one side is raised up. We can talk more about that as we get into some of the later parts of this chapter. But then you have the third beast, which is fast and swift. So you have the leopard, who is fast in and of himself, but then he has 4 wings, so he's just on top of that even more swift, able to move. Again, fierce. Leopards attack with a certain level of fierceness, but it has too many heads to be effective, right? It's got this divided mentality. So for something about it with the 4 heads, it's not quite in sync. But this too was given dominion. So on each 3 of those 3 things, you have something happening to it. So the first one, its swiftness is broken, the wing is broken. The second one is told to go and devour more. And the third one is given dominion. This morning we'll kick off our discussion. We didn't quite get into beast number 4. So let's start by reading verses 7 and 8. And then we can talk about some of the imagery that it's trying to elicit here. All right, so Daniel chapter 7, beginning in verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I'll give you about 30 seconds to just kind of get your thoughts together, and then we'll talk about the beast. All right. What do you notice? Again, not drawing implications to a specific king or kingdom yet. What imagery is it trying to get us to understand? What are we get? What is the feeling you get as you consider this beast in an image before you? Gary has a thought.
Well, it said it was different, and so it makes you think maybe stronger, more fierce. That'd be a question to answer. Different how?
Yeah, different how? What might show us how he sees it as different? I think more fierce, more powerful is certainly within the idea that he's going for. What else do you notice, though? Aaron, and then Scott.
So yeah, the fourth beast is different than the rest, and can't be described by analogy. Really, there's no animal that he can reference to say, think of this type of beast, and this is kind of what I saw. There's nothing that he can draw our attention to help us conjure up an image.
Right.
And so he does his best to identify parts of the beast. One of the things that makes it different is 10 horns. We don't, that's a lot. And a horn with eyes on the horn. And so there's,
even that imagery feels very odd to think about and to try to put into words. How do I describe what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
And I think that's certainly the thrust of his point, that it is different, is the idea that there is no other image I can compare it to.
Right.
Scott, did you have something to add to that? Go for it.
The thing that I noticed was in the text, that things that were different. The other beasts all had something, the wings were plucked off. It was lifted up from the ground, made to stand.
Yeah.
All this is happening to them from
Yes.
another source. And so you've got, the bear was raised up on one side. I think even that is possibly done to it. I don't know.
Sure.
That part. What's the last one? Dominion was given to the leopard.
Sure.
That's coming from somewhere else, whereas
Right.
this one, you don't see any of that. It seems to raise up on its own. It seems to have its own kind of source in a way. You just don't see that wording, and I feel like it's its own kind of beast that's just kind of on its own and let to do its own destruction.
I think I see something that is maybe done to the beast. Ida has a thought, then Michi. We'll come back to that if we need to. But Ida, what are you seeing?
Did we already mention that it can speak?
No, we have not mentioned the idea of speaking, but let's come back to that. Let's stick to this idea of what is this. You've mentioned this idea that it's not really seeming to have anything being done to it. Is there anything being done to this beast? Michi?
No, I don't have the answer to that
Okay.
one. Sorry. But the first three, what was given to those was it the first one was like a human mind, and it was something where it comes off as the first three, it was given something to reason with.
Okay.
Even if it wasn't necessarily good or evil, there's that human aspect that they have to those three. Whereas this one, it's just all destruction. There's no ability, there's no human mind to try to figure out what to decide. It's just all evil here, essentially. It's terrifying.
The one way I would say that maybe that doesn't hold all the way through is what Ida just mentioned, is the idea that it does have the mouth of a man. So it's speaking like a man. So it has some reasoning, but it's not of a heavenly power. So, and eyes, right? And eyes of a man on the horn. I think Aaron pointed out the one thing that is being done to this beast, which is there are 3 horns plucked from it. It's something's being done to it. That's not that it just naturally fell off or that it chose to. It's that something happened where these 3 horns were removed from the presence of this new little horn coming up. Scott. Let's get the mic.
What for? Because they were, it says before which. So we've got the other horn, the little one that comes.
Yes.
It comes in among them, and before which they were plucked out. I saw it as the little horn plucking them out, being the one to pluck it out. So it's still coming from the beast. But I could be wrong.
I think the generality of the language there is enough to where it may look like that little one's doing it, but the implication, because of the imagery from the first three beasts having something done to it, and really what we're ultimately driving towards is the idea that the Almighty One is behind all this. And so I think even as the kings and kingdoms that it's talking about are taking shape and things are happening to it, it's all under the power and control of another being that's not visualized here. At least allowing it or instructing it or making sure that it happens. So, but I'll leave that open. I mean, if that's, if there's room for it being the little horn that does that, or is it this other power that seems to be doing that? I do want to then come back, though, to this idea of the mouth or the eyes that are on the horn. Like the horn is speaking, so, but it doesn't actually say that it has a mouth, does it? Nope. Oh, yes, and a mouth, speaking great things. So eyes and a mouth. It's got that human attribute of reasoning or talking and seeing things through man's perspective. Notice how it keeps saying of a man, of a man. That's the idea of this is not heavenly wisdom, this is human wisdom or human power on display.
Yeah, in line with that, how its teeth are made of iron, which is something that's man-made. Everything else we've seen was, it doesn't exist in nature, but it's based on natural things.
Yeah. Well, and certainly created. Iron does not naturally form in the form of teeth, right? You got to create that. You got to craft it somehow. Mark had another comment here.
Just from what everyone else has already been saying, this nation doesn't seem to have a God, or doesn't recognize God. When I see this, I have this interpretation, because in the first three, they're given things, and this is something that Michi was saying. They're either given something or they're told something. So you see this sort of dominion over them. God brings in all these governments. He's the one. This one seems a little wild, and he's the only one that's described as strong, because we're not shown his strength by the animal.
Right.
So to me, it appears to be totally godless in the sense of God, of Jehovah God.
Well, and even in its description, it lacks any descriptor that shows the creation of God. Because everything that Daniel uses for the other three beasts are God's creations, are God's, they're somewhat of a broken form of it. I mean, it's a lion with wings. That's not how God created them. It's a deformity of it, but it is imagery that we would know from God's creation, whereas, as Mark is pointing out here, this doesn't seem to be of that style. It's so ungodly that you can't even describe it with God's creation. And that's where he resorts to that idea in verse 7. Terrifying, dreadful, and exceedingly strong. It's like, how do you describe how scary this beast is? How do I even begin to help you understand how much I am scared at the mere sight of what I'm seeing? And that's how he tries to do it, with that terrifying, dreadful, and exceedingly strong. Okay, what other thoughts do we have about the beast here? Dave.
Well, historically, mankind are completely fearful of creatures with horns. If you ever seen these, you can watch a video of these big bucks with 8-point
Sure.
antlers and stuff. They come after you.
Right.
They can kill you really fast.
Yeah.
And hurt you seriously. I just see how God, with the teeth and the horns. He wanted to definitely make sure that they recognize the fearfulness and dreadfulness of this thing.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, whether it's a multi-point buck, or it's a massive horned rhinoceros, or it's, horns are a dreadful sight. You see it on an animal and it's instantly, I don't want to mess with that. I'm running. Or I was at in Tampa at their Busch Gardens. They have a safari you can ride on. When I was down there, I was on the safari ride. It's in this big oversized vehicle, and we get into the rhino enclosure. And we're kind of driving along slowly, and the car just stops, and the guy goes, "Don't make a sound. Don't move. The rhino is in a mood right now. We do not want to make it more angry." And this massive rhino comes running from behind this rock, and the truck starts rocking from this rhino running through its enclosure, and it's doing laps. It's got the zoomies is what it's got, right? Like it's going and going, and it's not stopping, and you don't tempt it. That thing's so powerful, that horn is so impactful, it'd go right through that truck. So you don't mess with it, And then to have 10 of those horns, and then another one show up, and then they're like transforming and disappearing, and things are happening, and like that becomes this otherworldly thing that you go, what is going on? I don't want to mess with it. I have no control over that. It is so incredibly different than what I can describe. Michi.
Speaking of the horns too, we can assume here that the horns are like normal size, giant. They're all like the same size. But what's interesting to me is that there was an emphasis on a little horn.
Yeah.
And that the smallest thing made the biggest impact and uprooted the 3 other ones. And let's just say this is symbolic of a little horn coming in that's just evil, of how something so small can come in and uproot you. It doesn't have to be this big grandiose thing. This little horn came in with eyes and uprooted the other big 3 ones.
Yeah. Well, this little horn comes in not only with eyes. What do eyes represent? The ability to see and wisdom. What does the mouth represent? Able to talk, describe things, talk smoothly, be persuasive. And so this little horn that's unassuming has this great power to pluck out the 3 horns, but also to completely dissuade the entire beast, control it by the way it's talking. And he's just continues to talk throughout the rest of this imagery is what we're going to move towards. Okay, so anything else on the beast in terms of imagery and things you're seeing here? I summarized it this way when I was putting mine together. It's indescribable. It's just beyond really helping us understand. It's extremely powerful. It's absolutely fear-inducing. And it's transforming in unnatural ways. I mean, we talked a lot about some more than that. But I think Ida had a good point last week as we were kind of wrapping up and talking about this 4th beast, is the idea that this being something that is so indescribable is probably the most fearful piece of the imagery. I think she said something along the lines of, and I kind of summarized it this way, the unknown or the indescribable is the most intimidating. We are most afraid of the things that we can't explain or describe or understand. And the fact that he can't put into words that the beast looked like this other animal or this conglomeration of animals was terrifying in and of itself. And that's where this imagery takes us. And so we see in all of them, there is this bestiality, not just in the imagery, but in the power, in the strength, in the swiftness, in everything, the devouring. It's chaos, really, in most of these. It just seems to be this beast going at it and not really seeming to have any sort of purpose or understanding. It's just doing its thing until the one comes in and causes it to devour more, or gives it dominion, or, there's another force that comes in and does something to it. So, as we're seeing these images, Daniel continues to describe what he sees. So let's read verses 9 through 14, because this is all one image. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked then, because the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one, like a son of man. And he came before the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. All right? Take about a minute to mark up your notes or find some questions there, and then we'll talk about it. All right. What do you notice, or what questions do you have? Gary?
One thing I noticed, the Ancient of Days has power over all the beasts.
Okay. So we see an exuding of power over all the beasts, and it's drawn from this imagery of the Ancient of Days taking control of the scene.
It's the first time the word judgment is used in connection to the beasts.
Okay, yeah, we're seeing.
And books were open.
Okay, so the judgment is done through the opening of the books, and so there's kind of a standard by which the judgment is taking place. It's not just happening like the beasts were, or seemingly were. We now have a judgment scene where books are being opened, the record is being recorded and being reviewed, and judgment is taking place as a result of it. This is a different power. Scott.
Yeah, you get this scene of thrones.
Yeah.
And there were no thrones in all of these beasts don't have thrones. They just have an area they conquer and kill, and
right.
That's their place. But this has real purpose. This has, the thrones themselves, where power comes from, where real power comes from. And the fact that it's plural, I think, is interesting. The fact that you've got thrones.
Yes.
It's not just the one throne of the Ancient of Days.
Yeah.
There's these other thrones, and they're all involved in this.
Right.
And then, I don't know if I should just keep going. There's so much in there.
Let's pause there for a
yeah.
second. But yes, this idea of thrones versus what the beasts had. Isn't that the contrast that we were called to see in Daniel chapter 4? When Nebuchadnezzar was on his throne and then made to be a beast and restored to his throne. So we have that contrast of that these beasts are they seem to have power, but they're just they're just roaming. They don't have a dominion really until the one is given it. But they're just kind of doing their own thing, whereas we have the throne now and the thrones of the ancient where the Ancient of Day comes. And that seems to be set in place. And that is the authority to which you go to for judgment. That is where you go and go before. And we do see that angels judge, we judge. And so there is a plurality of the idea that there are thrones, there are judgment thrones that are for a larger force than just God. And so he's showing this idea that there's multiple witnesses to the things that are going to be judged. Might be the imagery he's going with. I saw some other hands start to pop up. Dave, we'll go with that.
Well, this is kind of a complex chapter here,
Sure.
especially this portion, because
Yeah.
it kind of supports the rapture thing that people talk about.
Sure.
I don't believe that, but I believe that this is a glimpse, a glimpse of judgment, and that God's going to give. And so when he does that, he's destroying these he casts them down, but it's not talking about you and me, not yet. So, but what it does do, it talks about the Ancient of Days, which I believe is talking about God.
Okay.
And it refers to the Son of Man, which I believe is Jesus. So it's interesting that if you look at the words, like in Revelation 4:4, it talks about those that sat on the thrones, the 24 elders. If you keep reading, like if you read in Isaiah, it's that just 15. It describes the judgment of God in terms of fire. So there's a lot of allusions to it. Hard to delineate them, but it's not. I don't think it's our judgment, obviously, because we haven't been judged. But he did have a judgment against these thrones and these evil people. And I'm not going to get into who they are.
All right. Good. So yeah, I like that what you're seeing here is clearly, as Gary had pointed out, this is a judgment scene. It's given to us in the form of a vision. So this is not a direct prophecy of the final judgment, because this is clearly judgment of the beasts, not the final judgment. But it is a judgment scene that then is used later, like in Revelation and in other books and narratives, to draw on this imagery of judgment to show that it's the same one who judged the beasts is going to be judging elsewhere as well. And there's beautiful imagery that connects all of that. Mark has some thoughts there.
Yeah, I think when you look up that word, it says here that the thrones were placed, and that word placed means to be thrown. These things are like thrown down I'm seeing it as thrown down out of heaven. And here comes God. And it kind of reminds me of Paul when he talks about it's a terrifying thing to be sit before the judgment seat of God. That's what I'm envisioning here. And there's just so much imagery, again, as we see translated into Revelation as well. But same thing in Revelation, God's throne has wheels. What does that imply?
Ezekiel, God's throne has wheels as well.
I have to wonder, what does that imply? I mean, is he driving around with it? I mean, you can't escape it, kind of a thing, or what does it even mean?
Okay, so let's talk about this first thing, the idea the thrones were placed. Whether thrown down, which is an interesting view or imagery to conjure up, is the idea that these beasts are on the solid ground, and here come these thrones, almost like a like it just hits the ground, and here's the scene. Or if it's a forced placement, and it is not moving, right? Some form of that is being shown to us, that these thrones are not immovable. You don't restructure this scene at all. But then the idea of the fiery flames and the wheels burning with fire. It's the same idea, Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 4 through 21. You want to see a larger description of God's throne. That's really interesting. And then try to think about how that would look visually is interesting. But let's talk about then, what do his throne has wheels. What is that supposed to show? Dave has a thought.
Well, it could be a couple of things, but for me, and you can hit me if you think I'm wrong, I think that it indicates...
Your wife just hit you, by the way.
She just did. I think it indicates God's endless activity,
Okay.
endless work.
Okay.
It's time, and kind of alludes to time.
Okay.
And it's endless for him. It keeps spinning.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I'm following with you. Barry has... Well, let's... Go ahead.
What do wheels do? They allow you to move about.
Right.
Okay, so I think it's saying that he can move anywhere and everywhere.
Good. Okay, so why would omnipresence, the ability to move anywhere and do anything, Michi had a thought there?
I just lost it. Never mind. Just
Okay.
Sorry.
Aaron will pick up, and then maybe we'll get back to you.
Yeah, I think it's the concept of his dominion is not fixed in any particular location.
Okay.
So his rule, his authority, his power, thrones typically are just fixed into one place
Okay.
and over a certain geography.
Sure.
He's not limited.
Okay, so not limited, able to go and judge where he needs to, has dominion over all things, can move, and what do you got, Michi?
In like with the time, I think of clocks and how God exists outside of that. Also, God coming out to carry out his will.
Okay,
And that's what I think of when I think of the wheels.
sure.
I also wanted to add here too that without trying to relate it to Daniel for a second, because that's what I do, there's this imagery here where it says that his throne is a flaming fire and a river of fire was flowing. And I also think of, well, in the CSB it says a river...
Instead of wheels of fire?
in the beginning of verse 10, it says a river of fire was flowing.
Oh, a stream of fire issue. Gotcha, yeah.
And I also think of back in Genesis where God's Spirit is hovering over the waters. And I know that God is also represented as fire too. And I wondered if there was any correlation to that imagery of Genesis and what we see here as well.
I would actually draw the stream of fire back to Ezekiel and the idea that from the temple is going to come a stream of water that is life-giving. But here we have the throne giving out a stream of fire, which is judgment. And so they're coming from the same source, the throne of the Ancient of Days. You have one that's a stream of water and life, one that is a stream of fire and judgment. Tom has a thought there.
So in verse 11, we have to be clear that in verse 11 it speaks that the beast was slain and the body destroyed. So it's a very destructive process that seems more like judgment. It says, but for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away and their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I think it's interesting, the contrast there. You know, with the other beasts, it's almost like they were kind of allowed to die. They just kind of withered and died.
Okay.
Whereas the beast, the man made with iron teeth and everything, was actually destroyed and burned. It's a much more kind of active process that feels like judgment to me.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You do see that they do not get the instant destruction, but it's a removal of dominion and power, and that they just kind of dissipate into the existence, right? Let's go back to these wheels, though. I want you to think. If the wheels are showing God's ability to have dominion and move around the earth, what is different about his movement than what you see in the beast's movement? And the images that are given to show their ability to move around the earth. Lisa.
Well, in Hebrew, the wheels are called ophanim.
Okay.
Ophanim. So they're kind of have their own existence. They're creatures,
Okay.
sort of. They represent mobility, omnipresence, God's judgment, divine power, and omnipotence.
Sure.
So limitlessness,
Okay.
where all the other creatures had a limit on
Okay.
their ability. Even God decided for them what would happen to them.
Yeah.
3 of the beasts were allowed to live out their lives according to the lives they were allotted by God. And the 4th beast was utterly destroyed. But the wheels just showed God's power and his ability and his everything that he had to determine the fates of all the other beasts.
Yeah. I
And
think
judgment basically on in existence itself.
Sure. Okay. Good. Aaron had something to add to that.
The point that Lisa is making is correct, and this was written in Chaldean, so this is actually a Chaldean word, but
Okay.
everything that she said is still accurate. The
The Hebrew translation
Yeah.
that they use at times.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
So the wheels don't get tired, I think is the
Okay.
is the
Good.
comparison between the leopard or that can obviously run and travel and
Sure.
and these kingdoms that we're not talking about.
Yeah.
These animals do go out and conquer and certain geographies.
Sure.
They do have some mobility, but they do get tired and they are limited. A wheel will roll
Yes.
forever.
Yes, as long as it doesn't break down. But one of the things that I see in this is when you look at the beasts, especially 1 and 3, what do they have for movement to express their ability to move? Wings. Wings can't fly sideways. Wings can't fly backwards. Wings only move forwards. Generally speaking, right? When you think of a bird using its swiftness of its wings, which direction is it going? It's only going forward. It's only going in one direction. When you look at the imagery of God's wheels under his throne, especially Ezekiel chapter 1, they move in every direction like you've been talking about. And so what we're seeing is a contrast between these beasts that are primarily forward-moving predators, but and able to judge what's in front of them effectively. But God, in his throne, is able to go in every direction. There is no limit to his power. There's no limit to his judgment. There's no limit to his ability to move and discern. He's looking every which way at any given moment. Lito. Let's get the microphone, please.
Yeah, I think you're referring about Ezekiel 1:16 about those wheels. Yeah, and the wheels, when you have wheels, you can turn to, as you have mentioned, anywhere and in a fast way rather than those wings. Move forward, backward, and everything with the wheels. And the wheels can, as you have said, he would know very fast and he would react very fast.
Good.
Because of the wheels.
Good. Okay. What else do we notice then? And maybe I'll do this little transition. We got a few minutes left here. because what we've done is move to the throne room, right? Now, this is imagery, so just like the beast, there have been those who have decided to take it on themselves to try to give us some feel of what this would have looked like. So I've thrown a number of them up here, just so that you'll being shown here on the screen. What other things do you notice that come from the text, not just the artist's version of the text, but what do you notice that we haven't talked about this image? We'll have Scott up here, if you don't mind.
So you've got the image of this court and judgment happening, and it says that the court sat in judgment.
Yeah.
And the books were opened.
Yeah.
And I just think it just shows, I see the contrast of the beasts. They're after their own desire. They're creating their own way. They're all that stuff. They're just devouring to gain for themselves. Sure. Whereas this is based on truth. It's based on the books.
Facts.
It's based on facts.
Yeah.
And now you've got the truth opened. And that is what the judgment is coming from. And it's just neat to see the stability. And in this, it's funny because when I was looking at it, I actually saw peace coming from this.
Yeah.
Which the image really isn't. But the piece is that it's being done properly.
Good.
It's being done in the right way. It's coming from the right place. And so there's something about that you say, that's the kind of, what do you call it? What am I looking for? Justice. That's the word I'm looking for. That's the kind of justice we really seek and want and desire. And he's showing it here.
Yeah, and if you'll make your way to Aaron and then Lito, I would agree that there's a certain level of peace that comes from this. I would say it comes because there's intentionality and there's stability in how they're doing it. The thrones are placed, right? God is on scene. The books are opened. Everything has a purpose, and it's being fact-checked.
I'm not sure if we mentioned the clothing
We have
being
not yet. Go there.
white as snow, his hair like pure wool.
Yeah.
Just a symbol of purity and righteousness and holiness.
Yeah.
And I think that again, that's kind of what Scott is alluding to, in that this judgment is coming from a place of purity, of holiness, of righteousness, and that the world is kind of being set straight. Right, the crooked paths are being made straight.
Sure.
in this judgment.
Yeah, I'd say the clothing, especially being white, is that idea of purity. I would add to the hair being, his head being like pure wool. When you think of an older person and they have grayed completely, what do you typically expect from that person? Wisdom. And so this is the sign of wisdom is being exuded out of this character. Not to belittle or minimize God being represented here, but this image that is being given is the idea of pure wisdom. I mean, he has reached the ultimate wisdom. Lito?
Yes, I look at your the image there that you put on the board. It reminds me of verse 9, which is really the exact description of what is written in here. White as snow, seated in his throne.
Yes.
And the Ancient of Days, as we all know, that the Ancient of Days is far back beyond, like Jesus Christ has mentioned, the Ancient of Days. And I think it's the description of white as snow and his clothing is completely, as I go with Aaron, it's the purity and the righteousness of God, which is being described in here.
Yeah.
That displaced all the thrones beside him.
Good. And there's an added level, Lisa will get the last comment here. There's an added level of surety and peace in this, that what the beasts have to do to show their power and judgment over something is they have to thrash around and do some wild movement. And what's this Almighty One doing? The Ancient of Days. He's just seated. And it's going to go back to this idea that he's going to be able to speak judgment. With the breath of his mouth, he'll have control. He won't need to thrash around. Go ahead, Lisa.
Everything's on fire.
Yeah.
There's
It's all burning to the ground. No.
the throne was flaming fire, the wheels were blazing fire, the river of fire was going out from his presence.
Yes. It's absolute judgment is the idea here. I'm sorry. Purifying could be part of that. We do see fire used in two ways. One is a purifying fire, and one is a true judgment fire, where the judgment is there to burn and devour, versus I'm going to refine you through this process and have a perfect temperature to get you where you're going to go. Whereas this seems to be that one that's like the fire is at total power, and put it on context of Daniel chapter 3 then, where what was happening in the furnace. The power of the flame was, what was it, 7-10 times hotter? It was so hot that nothing could stand. And that's the idea here, is that he's going to pour that judgment out on the beasts only. And so they are getting full judgment, devouring. There's nothing going to withstand that. All right, that's our time for today. We'll get back to this next week and pick up and look more towards like 13 and on. But great conversation. Good job looking at the imagery there. I really appreciate that.